started in just 1 minute. Just want to give people the opportunity to join us so that they can start with us from the beginning. Well, people are jumping in here. Are our presenters ready? You get a thumbs up. All right, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our session today on supporting students through transitions and developmental issues. My name is Christine Cherry. I'm the Director of Student Activities and also one of the members of the core New Student Orientation Planning Committee. So we are so happy that you're joining us for these programs leading up to orientation, which is starting next week, which we're so excited for. But we also know that folks probably have some questions, and we want to make sure that everyone has all of the information, all of the resources so that people are feeling good about coming onto campus or joining us remotely. So one of the things that I just wanted to do before I hand off the presentation to our presenters is just go over a few housekeeping items. Number one, if you are not muted, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be wonderful, just to make sure that there's no background noise and everyone can hear the panelists. The second piece is that we are recording the session today. So anyone that isn't able to join us today will be able to view this recording on the NSO campus site. And then the last piece of information is we are going to be taking questions today in the chat. What I would ask is that if you're comfortable either sending me a private message with the question in your email or putting your email with your question, that will allow us to get back to you and respond to any questions that we're not able to address in person today, but we'll still ensure that you get your question answered. So with that, I am happy to pass this over to Charlie Morse, who's our Associate Dean and Director of the Student Development and Counseling Center, as well as our Senior Community Advisors who are just back on campus today. So I will pass it over to Charlie, and I'll be back later to help answer or to share the questions.
Thanks so much, Christine, and welcome to all who are joining in. And it's, for me, after a long summer of planning and trying to pull things together, it's wonderful to see our students back on campus and the campus coming alive. So I'm just very happy to welcome Akansha, Noah, and Chase to this conversation. This is a conversation that we typically have as parents are dropping their students off on campus. Myself as Director of Counseling, lead a conversation with parents, and we bring in our real experts, our student community advisors who know our campus very well. So we're kind of replicating that in this environment for you. So the format will be for the first half hour or so. I'm going to talk with Chase, Noah, and Akansha about their lives here and kind of maybe get some of those questions out there in a conversation. But we will kind of reserve the second half for your questions, and we'll all be here to answer those. So let me ask that our student experts begin by introducing themselves and kind of a little bit about themselves and their background here at WPI. Chase, why don't you start us off?
Hi everyone, my name is Chase Gaudino. I'm a senior studying civil engineering. On campus, I am a senior community advisor for this upcoming year. I'm in American Society of Civil Engineers and also the Dean of Engineering Student Advisory Board.
Thank you, Chase. And Akansha?
Hey everyone, my name is Akansha Deshpande. I'm also a senior here. I'm majoring in biomedical engineering with a concentration in biomechanics and a minor in global health. On campus, I'm also a senior community advisor, as they mentioned, and then I'm also involved in Greek life and club tennis, and yeah.
Thank you, Akansha. And Noah?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Noah Roberts, also a senior community advisor, also going to be a senior this upcoming year. I'm double majoring in mechanical engineering and electrical and computer engineering here on campus, and outside of just being in SCA along with Chase and Akansha, I also give tours on campus, part of the student mentor program. I play club tennis, and I'm a part of Greek life.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. So I'll just begin with a brief intro. I've been here at WPI for over 25 years, and I can come at this conversation from a lot of different perspectives when it comes down to it. Certainly as an administrator who's been here and a director of counseling. And I know from a developmental perspective, there's a lot that goes on in students' lives and in your sons and daughters' lives at this stage. In terms of identity, roles, relationships, finding what they're passionate about in the world. It's one thing that I love about my job is that it's such a rich time in life that I get to talk to your sons and daughters while they're here at WPI. I also can look at this as a parent. I had some 10 to 12 years ago in the same position as you, sending off 3 of my children to various colleges. Each in their own way. There is nothing I can tell which is the way it's going to go for your son and daughter, because there's so many different personalities. And you know, my oldest was very confident and just marched right onto campus. My middle child was the funny one and got to know people by telling jokes and such. And my youngest is just a plain love, and just everybody loves her. So there are ways of connecting and finding themselves in each environment are different. And that's true for all the students that come here. But as an administrator, I know how tricky it can be for students, and especially the degree to which they may buy into a few myths when they get here. One of them has to do with that they shouldn't have to struggle. So many of your sons and daughters, our students, maybe it just came to them. They went to class, they studied, but they did really well in high school, and they get to WPI and perhaps they're going to struggle here for the first time or in ways that they haven't before. And if they have that thought, I shouldn't have to struggle, I'm doing something wrong, that's one of those hurdles that's a real challenge for them. And the second might be that success equals doing it on my own. Now, while establishing themselves as independent persons is going to be an important part of things, nobody makes it through WPI. I think this will come out in the conversation here with our SCAs. Nobody makes it through alone. There's so much collaboration and mutuality that goes on in this environment. And that might be the second big hurdle. But it can be a stressful transition. We're going to talk about the supports that are in place here. There's tremendous peer support and camaraderie here on this campus, and there are supports that are just built right out in terms of the campus infrastructure. The key is asking for help, for sure. And that might be the third big milestone that our students experience, is that willingness to say, I really need some help. Can you help me out with this? From a friend, from a mentor of some kind, from health services, counseling services. That's a real important aspect of things. But we're eager to welcome your students, excited to have them part of our community. And just in a few weeks, they'll be here. So without any further ado, I'm going to open up the conversation for our SCAs. And first, I'd just like to generally open it up. Can you talk about your experience thinking back to when you transitioned to WPI, maybe what some of your concerns were, what it was like when you first got here, and maybe like how you adjusted to this place in your own way?
So when I first came to WPI, I was a little nervous at first with making friends. And it was one of those things that you went to school with the same people for 12 years of your life before, but through the Facebook group chat and like interacting with people on that, and then on other forms of social media. And then I also got to meet more students at an alumni barbecue that was hosted over the summer. So then coming to campus, I had these familiar faces. And then through NSO, I was able to make friends along the way. And that really was so exciting to me because everyone was in the same boat. Like we were all looking to make new friends, and that was a great experience and made my transition a lot easier. And it was something that I realized I didn't have to be scared of.
I kind of had a similar experience. I also went to one of those alumni luncheons and like did an overnight. So I kind of had a sense of WPI, I suppose, but I definitely tend to be a little bit of a worrier. So I was very nervous that I had potentially made the wrong decision in choosing the school, or that I wouldn't make friends very easily. But like Jay said, everyone's in the same boat. So everyone's obviously also trying to make friends. They don't really know anybody. So everyone's super welcoming right away, even the upperclassmen. Like, it definitely doesn't have that kind of cold and competitive atmosphere that you'd expect from a tech school. Like, it definitely does lend itself to teamwork and just making friends very easily. And another thing I was really nervous about was kind of making the most of my experience. Like, I was just worried that like in high school, I didn't like join clubs right away. So I was like, okay, like I need to like join everything. I need to kind of do as much as I can during my 4 years here. So I definitely kind of stressed myself out there a little bit. But as you go, you kind of figure out what you're passionate about. You can definitely kind of zero in that way as well.
I myself wasn't super nervous when coming to campus. I was a little bit more open-minded in my approach. I just was like kind of similar to things that Chase and Akansha had touched on, like kind of keeping that mindset of everyone's in the same exact boat. You know, when I got to school, I only really knew one person. That was somebody who had gone to my high school the year before. And then I got on my freshman year floor and I started talking to people, and that was a little bit easier because again, we're all in the same exact boat. It's like, oh, hey, we're also WPI freshmen looking to make friends because we don't know anybody at the school. So it happens pretty naturally. And like I think Akansha had touched on, upperclassmen are always willing to reach out, make new friends as well, and interact with more people on campus.
Thanks, Noah. Thank you all. A few of you referenced NSO, New Student Orientation, which is kind of quite a structured program that we set up to welcome new students and get them oriented. Can you talk a little bit more about what are the elements of new student orientation and what was your experience with that?
I can take that one. So essentially, new student orientation kind of takes place in the days between you move in and when classes start. And the whole point is just to kind of get you acclimated to WPI, so you kind of have a little bit of a foundation to kind of work with before you're like thrown in the deep end of classes. So that few days is kind of set up to get you kind of familiar with the resources on campus, like the SDCC or our Academic Resource Center, how tutoring works, like where you can find food on campus, what's the best place to study, like things like that, as well as more social things, like just getting to know people that are around. If you like go to different sessions with people that aren't on your floor, you might get to make friends that way. And then we also have like an activities fair and an event with the Greek organizations on campus. So that way you can kind of get to know upperclassmen as well as the extracurricular opportunities on campus. So it kind of helps you kind of form a little bit of a support system before you kind of get going. So that way you kind of know what you're working with. And if you do find that you need tutoring or anything like that, you kind of know where to go for that.
Gotcha. Chase, Noah, anything to add to that in terms of NSO?
During NSO, you are also introduced to your Insight advisor, your community advisor, and your residential advisor. And they make up your I team, so your Insight team. And you will be with your Insight team through all of A and B term, which is really great. And those are people that you can go to for resources to find out where things are on campus, just to talk to, and they will really be a guiding support throughout.
So I know that the resident advisor lives right there on the hall for students who are living residentially on campus. There's a faculty advisor, as Chase just said, and SCAs or CAs, community advisors. How will you be interacting with students, CAs, this year? What kind of different strategies might you take on in the context of students moving here during the pandemic?
I can take that one. So we are actively trying to use different strategies to reach out to students, especially with the community advisor staff. For those of you who, I'm not sure if it was explained, SCA means Senior Community Advisor. So myself, Chase, Akansha, as well as two others are going to be kind of overseeing the community advisors who will be directly interacting with the students who are part of their I teams, as Chase had mentioned. And as far as alternative methods we're trying to use to get students to meet each other and to meet students ourselves, we're going to be trying to employ outdoor spaces where we can have students together, as well as, of course, using a virtual setting to meet students and coming up with some fun activities that students can participate in, whether it be playing some sort of Pictionary game online or maybe watching a movie together, just to ensure that students are still getting some contact with one another, still having a somewhat similar experience to if we weren't maybe going through this.
Yeah. Thanks, Noah. I know that typically there's quite a bit that goes on when students arrive in terms of orientation, and you've mentioned some of those elements, the activities fair and things like that that help people get connected. But new student orientation lasts right throughout A and B term. It's an ongoing process that community advisors and RAs are organizing programs for students to kind of support their kind of gradual transition and connection over the course of the whole first 2 terms here. We all, well, you all know, my SCAs here, that WPI is a very busy place. It can be very fast-paced here with our 4 7-week terms, focusing on 3 classes. Can you give folks a feel for how that kind of works out in terms of your schedules? And in terms of maybe each of you talking about how you found your balance in that. Each of you have talked about ways that you became involved on campus, and we do encourage that for sure, that extracurricular involvement. But how did you kind of find that right balance, and what's life like here in terms of the pace of things?
So it's definitely something to get used to at first, because I didn't come from a similar structure in high school, but that was one of those things that I reached out to different resources to try to find what worked for me best. And something even on campus, a lot of people use Outlook calendar to even if you're scheduling a meeting with someone or to put your classes in your Outlook calendar just so you have your schedule there. While some people prefer to use an agenda and a paper and pencil. It's definitely one of those things that it took me a little bit to find what worked best for me. And it probably wasn't even until my sophomore year that I was confident in my way to schedule and my time management. But it works for me now, and I use Outlook calendar. It's kind of a joke sometimes. People will be like, you use your Outlook calendar religiously, because it's just something that I live by. And if it's not my Outlook calendar, I need to make it work. But I'm also involved on campus. And so that's something that I've had to take into consideration with scheduling and doing homework and getting projects done, and then also going to class. And I also have a job on campus. And it's, for me, being busy and having all those things has made me manage my time so much better, because I have a structure. I know what time my classes are every day. I know what time my weekly meetings are. So scheduling that in, I then am able to see the time that I have to do my homework, and then the time that I have for me as well.
Thanks, Jace. Noah, Concha, anything to add? Pace, finding balance?
Yeah, it's just honestly, you can prep for it using your own kind of way, using your Outlook calendar like Chase had mentioned, but the best way to really prep for it is to get the experience yourself. Of course, your Insight team is there to help you along the way, your RA, CA, and IA. They're there to ensure that you're doing well in your courses and directing you to the resources that you may need. If maybe you're not doing so well in your courses, we have math and science help called MASH here at WPI, as well as academic advising, as well as professor office hours that students can attend. So there's really lots of outlets for help if you happen to need it. But as far as finding your own groove, that's something that that might come with a little bit of experience. And I saw that somebody had just really quickly put in the chat about specific classes and programs for time management. That's something that you actually can work with your I team. And there's programs that the CAs and RAs can run to help you get a little bit better with Outlook, get a little bit better with your own time management so that you can be successful.
Thanks, Noah. I know many of parents in the group are thinking, oh, my child is just my son or daughter is so laid back. They're just the scheduling thing doesn't work for them. And I think Jason Noah talked a bit about just how eventually students will learn that. And I've noticed over time here that WPI teaches that well in some respect. It is really busy, and it could be that they're laid back that first term they're here and realize, oh, there were certain things and adjustments I need to make to my schedule in order to be able to get to everything. So that time management sometimes comes over time for some students, particularly those who are wired in a little bit more of a laid back sort of way. Can you talk about, our parents might be interested, and you can share as much or as little as you like, but how did you work things out with your family, with your parents when you came here in terms of, I don't know, making those adjustments to the relationship, being away from home and kind of being more independent? How did that come about for you guys?
I think for like me and my parents, it was definitely something that kind of like came as you went. Like my family is like very close. My parents are very like hands-on, I suppose. So it was something that was like a conversation I had to have with my mom, be like, hey, like I probably can't call you every day, but I'll call you on like Mondays, Thursdays, and Sundays, or whatever days that like you're more free. And that's something that like you need to have that conversation with your kids or your parents, because you want to make sure that they have time to like get their classes done if they want to join clubs and things like that. But you also want to make sure that that kind of relationship is still in place. So like my parents would always like come up for lunch and things like that if I can't like go home on every weekend, which is definitely the case now since like COVID and everything. So that definitely is something that kind of comes with time, but it needs open communication.
Thanks, Akansha. Noah, Chase, anything to add to that from your experience?
Yeah, I can add. So I might not be like the greatest example because my family, I wouldn't necessarily is like hands off when compared to a conscious family, but a little bit more independent in nature. And I almost have the problem of maybe I'm not contacting my family enough. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that I'm scheduling time to contact my family in my calendar and setting myself reminders like, hey, why don't you check in with mom, give her a call. I usually try to call my family around twice a week just to check in because, you know, they want to see how you're doing and I want to see how they're doing, how things are going on at home. So although I was like a little bit more of an independent person than some when it came to high school, I still made sure that I was keeping in contact with my family that way when I came to WPI.
Thanks, Noah. How about in terms of, you've all kind of mentioned the supports that are there. I think you mentioned academic advising and just the NSO program itself and counseling center, health services. Can you talk just a little bit more about how students go about learning about these resources and how and when to access them? And maybe even talking a little bit more about peer support as well here on campus.
So WPI is really great in that every student is just so kind and they always want to help each other out. Like that's something I've noticed from the beginning. And so if you ever did need help or if you ever did need to go to the SDCC, there's always someone that knows of like how to book it or things like that. And the Insight team is really helpful in that they point you all directly to it, or they will create a list and send you an email with how to find everything and where it is, how to go about making appointments if needed, which is really awesome. You also can go into offices or just email general offices and be like, hi, I'm interested in doing this. How can I get started?
Maybe Noah or Akansha, you could talk a bit more about academic resources, just in terms of what support is there for students if they're struggling academically.
Yeah, I can touch on that really quickly. I believe it's something that I might have mentioned a little bit earlier on as well. So if you happen to be needing academic help, of course, this is something that you can reach out to your I-team about, meaning your Insight advisor who's a faculty member or your CA or RA who are students. But if you need academic help beyond that, of course, we have MASH, which is Math and Science Help, which has individual sessions for students depending on what class they're taking. and that's specifically geared towards first-year students. So if you need some assistance on like maybe Calc 1 or maybe Chem 1, MASH will have certain times throughout the week that maybe you can, I'm assuming this year it might be a little bit more of a virtual setting, but you can log into that call. There'll be tutors there to help you out with any questions. I know when I went to MASH my freshman year, it was always working in groups, and I was able to talk with people, kind of work through a problem with them, and do practice problems that some of the TAs had put up on the board, and that was super helpful for me. But if maybe the MASH setting doesn't work for you, academic advising does do individual tutoring for you. So for certain classes, they have individual tutors if you're looking for a little bit more one-on-one academic help. And the very first resource I would say to consult is if you're having a problem in a class or maybe you're struggling to understand a topic, go to the professor. They are teaching you the information. Reach out to them, whatever medium it's going to happen to be this year. Usually professors are pretty good with email because they're on it all day answering student questions. So if you have a question about the topic, email the professor directly. They would love to help you out because, of course, that is their job to help you out.
Thank you, Noah. I've seen several questions come into the chat, kind of wondering, I think kind of probing for some read on what's it going to be like the day we arrive. And I know it'll be a bit different this year as we're spreading out the arrival over a longer period of time, but can any of you kind of give us just a flavor for just what that's going to be like for students? Maybe not necessarily in particulars, but I think there's some concern that students just might get lost in it all.
So generally kind of how it'll go is you'll have your time slot to kind of move in with your child and one parent, I suppose. And they've kind of put together like a whole system. So you're not really like lost or trying to figure out what's happening. You come in, you check in, they tell you exactly what to do. And regardless of when you move in or if you're moving in physically, like all of the resources that we've mentioned will still be available to you. So I know I saw one question where their student wasn't moving in until much later in like the phase move-in process, but the way that we've kind of, or not us, the people have structured new student orientation is that all of the information is presented to everyone kind of as they arrive. So it's not so much that the person who moved in on day one of move-in versus the last day has much of an advantage. They get all of the same information, and even if you are at home, all of those resources that are presented during new student orientation will be available kind of virtually in like a Zoom setting. So you'd still be able to attend all of those sessions and things like that. And the Insight program that we've been talking about this whole time with your CA, RA, and IA, there are also virtual teams in place for students who are choosing to stay remote. So it's not like they'll have any fewer resources or that they'll have to go through the orientation process again once they arrive. They kind of get everything as it comes, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I noticed a question about, a few questions about arrival at the Hampton Inn. And one specific question, will there be RAs and CAs and IAs assigned to the Hampton Inn? And I'm seeing enthusiastic nodding, yes. Actually, I'm aware that we built out our RA and CA support significantly in anticipating bringing in this class under these circumstances here to build out that on-the-ground student kind of frontline support. Can you talk a bit about other just living areas on campus and what students might expect living in different of the environments here that we offer for incoming students if they're coming onto campus?
I can touch on that a little bit. I actually previously served as an RA during my sophomore year, so I have a little bit of an inside scoop on the residential life. But so students are going to be either, I guess this year, either in residence halls or in the hotel, and I believe that there is a small amount of students that will be located in one of our houses on campus. And so the residence hall life is pretty much what you might have seen on a tour or what you might have heard. Students are going to be living with up to one other person, I believe. I believe we're down to all doubles on campus. And a residential style living that includes Stoddard, Riley, Morgan, Daniels, Institute. That's just kind of like you got the one hallway and you each have your own double room kind of setting. There's a joint bathroom on the floor. Depends on what floor you're on. For example, in the Stoddard complex, you only have one bathroom per floor because the floors are single gendered. Whereas on larger residence hall buildings, such as like Morgan and Daniels, where the floors are co-ed, you'll have two bathrooms on that floor. But that's just kind of like the residential style living that students will have. In those sorts of buildings, in Founders Hall, it's a suite style living, which means that you have also a small kitchenette inside of your suite, and you have like a small common area as well. And I saw some questions popping up about like whether or not iTeam would be like a pod. I'm pretty sure that in Founders, where you were living in a suite with five people total, that would be considered a pod because you're all living within close quarters of one another and sharing a bathroom as well as sharing that kitchenette and common area. And the hotel, I believe, is also doubles. I don't know a ton of information about the hotel, but students, I guess, get their own bathroom per room. So that's like a huge plus. So if you're a student, or maybe you are bummed about your student being placed inside the Hampton Hotel, honestly, I would be ecstatic given the resources that the students have there. Especially, I just saw the message, air conditioning. That's a big one because, you know, even though we are up in the Northeast, it does get hot here. So that will be a huge plus for students. And I don't think that being in the hotel will disadvantage students at all on getting involved in student life. They'll still have that RA, still have the IA, and still have the CA to give them all the support necessary. And the hotel isn't really that far away.
Thanks, Noah. I realize we've been skewing a lot of the questions towards students who are moving to campus and living off campus, but there's a number of the students who are going to start remotely. Can you talk just a little bit about what they might experience in terms of orientation to campus and what we set up to kind of address their needs?
Yeah, so we actually, pretty much everything that people are doing in person, the same thing is happening remote, which is really awesome. So you still have the Insight team meetings. You will still have all of the like presentations on resources and everything, which is really great. And you could even look at it as you're in an advantage point because you don't have to walk to and from locations if there is a meeting on campus, which is really awesome. But you still have the same exact resources that the same people do in person, which is really great. And some of the community advisors that are remote will also have students who are remote, which is really great too, because then they can help you out. And we all were remote in D-term, so we can share our experiences as well.
Thanks, Chase. Noah, Akansha, anything to add?
I honestly think that Chase covered a good amount of it.
Okay.
Again, like students are going to be disadvantaged for being remote as far as like the resources go with their iTeam, and that's like what makes WPI when you come for your first semester is that iTeam. Okay.
And I'll throw another question out there that comes up just about every year when we're doing this session on live on move-in day is, what's the feel for campus in Worcester? Many of our folks may be very familiar with Worcester, others maybe not so much. Can you comment just a little bit about campus safety and some of the aspects that are in place for that?
I can talk a little bit about that. It's definitely like the area of Worcester that we're in is like very residential. I know Worcester being a city can sometimes get a bad rep for just being a city and therefore being unsafe. But if you're on campus, anywhere within like 3 blocks of campus is really just off-campus apartments that WPI students live in. You'd have to kind of like get kind of far to start seeing people that don't go to WPI, but then you're in like Becker and like Clark territory. So it really is like a very like college student area. So it's a lot of people that are of a similar age. And so it definitely is like comfortable to kind of walk around here. I live far off campus. It takes me about 8 minutes to walk up to campus. And I walk back and forth by myself all the time. I'm small and a girl, and I don't think I've ever felt the need to like, I don't know, like have pepper spray or whatever. Like I walk around by myself all the time and it's really safe. But if you do like want someone to kind of take you home, I suppose we do have a student run shuttle service that we call SNAP. And you can just call them and be like, hey, like I'm at the library and I want to go to my apartment. But they'll take you anywhere within a mile of campus and to like Union Station and CVS and things like that. So they'll definitely pick you up and take you wherever you need to go if you don't feel comfortable walking home. That being said, most students typically use it if it's like raining or cold and they don't want to kind of make a trek back to their apartment or to the library or anything like that. So it definitely is like a really safe area.
Adding on to Akansha's point, campus police is also amazing. Like, they are absolutely amazing. Learn their names. They are the kindest people ever, and they will do anything for students. They're just so caring.
And I think to round out this talk on security and safety on WPI campus, we do use the blue light system. So if you ever feel unsafe on campus, we have blue lights located outside of, I believe, every single building. And the rule is that from one blue light, you're able to see at least 2 others. And it's just like a 1 button press, call directly to campus police, and the response time is like 60 seconds. So it's really quick because they're only located right down the hill. Like Chase had mentioned, they're all wonderful, wonderful people. That said, I've never heard of anybody in my, I guess, 3 years here on campus that has used the blue light system or has felt unsafe on campus. So if that doesn't speak to the safety of our campus, even though we are located in a city, then I don't really know what does.
I'll also touch a little bit on the shuttle service that I mentioned because I saw a couple of questions. So yeah, it does go from like the Hampton Inn and a couple of the off-campus like upperclassmen housing options that are really close to there, just like a block away, and it just kind of goes around. So it'll like drop you off like right in the middle of campus and also like the parking garage and things like that. And that runs every 20 minutes.
And there's another specific question in there about the Hampton Inn. It's pretty much on campus. It's in our gateway area, and it's directly across the street from Faraday, one of our upper class living halls. And there was a question in there about housing as well, off campus after sophomore year. Can you talk just generally as you've moved along about some of the other housing options other than on-campus housing in the area?
There's a lot of different options in terms of how you'd like to live as an upperclassman. There's kind of like 3 chunks, I suppose. If you'd like to stay on campus, you absolutely can. There's 2 buildings that are like suite style, one that's like a complex of like condo style apartments. There's also like dorm style living in Messenger as well. So however you'd like to live on campus, there's definitely an option for you. So you can definitely do that if that's where you're comfortable and that's where you'd like to stay. There's a good majority of students that choose to move off campus if that's like cheaper for them with their financial aid. Like that was less expensive for me, so I moved off campus. My junior year, I lived on campus my sophomore year. And then in terms of off-campus housing, like I mentioned, like all of the houses around like 3 blocks of campus are all like off-campus apartments. So it definitely is easier to kind of find an off-campus apartment. Like a lot of upperclassmen will kind of like hand down their apartment to someone who's younger or be like, hey, like my landlord's really cool. You should contact him and find an apartment through him. So if that's something that you'd like to do, that's definitely really doable as well. And the last chunk is Greek housing, which I'll let Noah talk about because he actually lives in a Greek house.
I'm currently in my Greek house right now. What a coincidence. So regardless of whether or not a student joins a fraternity or sorority, they have the opportunity to live inside the Greek associated housing should they want to. It's by no means like a forced thing. We have 13 fraternities and 6 sororities on campus. And I believe 12 fraternities have housing and 5 sororities have housing. The conch is nodding, and so is Chase, so I'm going to say that's correct. And so I saw Greek Rush. So Rush is a month-long process. Rush is for fraternity life, and that is usually the whole month of November. And that's obviously going to look a little bit different this year. I do not have details on that. That's something that's being ironed out currently by our upper-level Greek organizations such as Panhell and IFC, Interfraternity Council, and Panhellenic. But yeah, living inside a Greek house, it's honestly, I would say the benefit is you get to live with a bunch of your friends, and it's pretty cheap compared to some other options that you might have, such as living in an apartment or even living on campus. Certainly not something to count out when you're considering options for living outside of your first year. And like I said, it's available to anybody who happens to join a Greek organization. I guess assuming you join the 12 fraternities or 5 sororities that happen to offer housing.
So generally, we're kind of moving towards wrap up before we steer into maybe Christine sharing some of the questions. But I love this one question that came in. If you had one do-over when you packed and moved in your freshman year, what would you do differently? And I might expand it a little bit. Like that question is about like what you wish you brought. I would also open it up to what you wish you had done differently in terms of moving in. Go ahead, Chase.
This is something we actually talked about the other day, but funny situation, like my roommate, she brought an entire popcorn machine, like a big popcorn machine that you would see if you go to the movie theaters. And let me just tell you, that was not necessary at all. Like you get so excited about moving in and having like a new part of your life that you're like, I need this, like this is important. And along with clothes, like Contra mentioned that in one of our other meetings, and it's like, you really don't need as much clothes as you think you do. You only need enough to fit in that red container for move-in. So it's just don't bring as much stuff as you think you do. You won't use most of it.
Concha, Noah? Do-over?
I kind of echo that. In a similar vein to Chase's roommate, I brought a milkshake machine my freshman year. You don't need that. You'll never make a milkshake in your dorm. I guarantee it. I used it once. I definitely felt like I just kind of like panicked, I suppose, when I was packing. I was like, wow, like I'm leaving home. I've never been far from home for more than like a week at like summer camp or something like that. So I definitely kind of was like trying to compensate, I suppose, for like having my whole house and like my family. But like you really only need the things that you need to like do school and wear clothes. Like you definitely don't need to bring all of the random things that you think you do. That was kind of like the main thing that I felt like I did wrong, I suppose, when moving in. I definitely brought like too much stuff and like kind of stressed myself out that way.
Noah, anything to add?
The bringing too much stuff, honestly, is like, that's the crux of it. Like that's the number one thing. My main thing was I brought too much stuff. And then when I went home in between the AB term break, that was when like I took a bunch of stuff back. So like you're not stuck with it forever. And especially considering, I remember I lived in, my freshman year, I lived in Stod A. And those were triples at the time. And those, I'm going to be honest, were a little bit tight for triples. And I had a lot of stuff like shoved underneath my bed. And I was just like, at the end of the year, I went through it. I was like, I didn't even use half of this. Like I brought so much Tupperware. I'm like, I'm not using Tupperware. I was like, I was appalled by the amount of things that I had brought. And I think that the main move-in mistake that students make is packing too much stuff, for sure.
Thank you. Seems to be a consensus around that. And of course, that's our advice this year under the conditions is to pack lightly when you're coming, for sure. I saw a bunch of questions come in about bikes. And we do have bike racks available. You do need your own locks if you're bringing your own bike. There are, I think the bike share program is going to be live. I see Christine shaking her head. We kind of went back and forth with that, but found a safe way that we felt that we could do it. So bike share will be available, which is kind of like a bike access service with your ID. Why don't I turn it over to Christine to interject with any questions that we may have kind of brushed by a bit, or other topics that maybe we didn't hit on.
Sure, thanks, Charlie. There was a question about asking if there would be extra support to deal with the stress from coming to college during the age of COVID.
Well, I guess as director of the counseling service, I should address that a bit. You've heard, I think several of the students refer to SDCC, and that's what everybody calls us, SDCC, Student Development and Counseling Center. And like many student support services, we pivoted to be accessible remotely to students. We'll be here, we'll be open physically on campus, but in order to provide our service in the safest and most accessible sorts of ways, we're going to be connecting with students virtually for the most part. Again, we're very well known on campus, and we see more and more students reaching out to us. Close to 20% of the student population last year did just ask for some help in terms of adjusting or with some situation here on campus. So again, though, I also get back to the peers, and I can't emphasize that enough, is that this is just a wonderfully collaborative environment. And as a counseling center, we've really doubled down on that. And we train a lot of our students, certainly our CAs, RAs get specialized training, but a lot of our community gets training in how to recognize and respond to peer distress when their friends are struggling. It's a system that really wants to kind of build as much support in all across the community as possible. But the other part is people who are responsive and say, hey, you should probably connect with SDCC or connect with tutoring or talk to your faculty, or you should probably call home. This whole asking for help thing is really something that's highly promoted.
Great, thank you. Kind of going off of that a little bit, could you comment on the challenges that you faced during the pandemic? And maybe this might be more for the students as they've transitioned from C to D term last spring, what their experience was like.
So I actually was away on IQP. So IQP is the interactive qualifying project that you do your junior year. And I was coming back from Hawaii, and when we found out that classes were remote, and so I was looking forward, like I haven't seen my friends in a couple of months. I was really excited, and to then go remote, it was definitely something that I had to adjust to, but it was actually very surprisingly like smooth and an easy transition that WPI did in a matter of like 2 weeks, which was crazy. But professors are so accommodating and want to make sure that you are getting any of the help that you need and making sure that you are learning along the way. And so I had some classes that were synchronous, so running at the same time. And then I also had some pre-recorded lectures that I could watch and do on my own time as well. But it was a pretty smooth transition and made it work. And yeah, it was good.
I would kind of echo the how accommodating WPI was in terms of kind of making that change quite quickly. Now going into the semester, it's something that we have, or the administration's been aware of for a while. So they've kind of put in a lot more planning, and it's definitely a change that they kind of got to foresee, I suppose, where in D term, we kind of had to make that shift over like a 2-week period, which is obviously something that we had never kind of seen coming. So I definitely have full faith in the fact that I had friends who are international students, and WPI was super helpful in making sure that they had everything that they needed, like a place with Wi-Fi to do work. And if you ever feel even my classes that are hybrid now, if you don't feel comfortable coming into a lab one day, you don't have to. And they've definitely done a really good job of kind of making sure that you have all of the things that you need to feel comfortable doing school in the midst of all of this madness.
Great, thank you. One more question. How do you all anticipate making friends to be a different experience while wearing facial coverings? Do you think there'll be smaller groups of students? What are you all anticipating?
So as far as what to anticipate for it, it's one of those things I think we'll figure out as we go along and we get there. One thing about not being able to see faces with the mask is a term that's been going around is this smize. So when somebody's smiling because they squint their eyes when they have their mask on. So I guess that's how you know the person you're talking to actually does like you. But as far as still meeting students, obviously I would probably say that the amount of outreach that you might get on campus would probably not be the same level as it would be just simply due to circumstances, to say it pretty bluntly. But that said, you're still going to have a lot of interaction with people who happen to live on your floor, other people who are on your I-team, whether that be virtually or maybe in an outside setting with your CA. And CAs are actually required to host a program, so that could be a virtual program or maybe an outside program with a team that isn't their own. So for example, if I happen to be a CA for one of the floors in the Stoddard complex and Chase happens to be a CA in one of the floors in Riley, then we can collaborate together to do a program so that maybe my students can meet people from Chase's floor. So it's not just people that you're seeing on the floor and interacting with all the time. You have different outlets to meet other first-year students as well, even though we are kind of going through all of our different COVID regulations that are going on right now. There's still opportunities for you to meet other people on campus.
To add on to Noah's point, you can also meet friends through any organization that you get involved with, any clubs, and a lot of club meetings will be virtual this year, but you'll be able to, even like through the chat, you can talk to people if you see that, or if you hear that they said something, you're like, wow, they seem pretty cool, I want to talk to them. But that's really great because you'll have the opportunity to go to a bunch of different clubs virtually and do all the same things and meet new people, which is awesome.
If I can help with the transition too, I think we're really excited this year actually to be offering a virtual student activities fair for students. So on Friday, September 4th, from 3 to 5, all of our clubs and organizations will be live to be able to chat with students in this face-to-face environment over Zoom. So we are making those opportunities available for students too. So it's not just connecting with the face covering. There was a question in the chat about, are there any training options? You know, I think there's a lot of different tools out there for students. When we think about Canvas, we think about BannerWeb, we think about TechSync. Can you talk a little bit maybe about how these programs are integrated into Insight and if there are other training programs beyond the Insight program?
I can touch on this a little bit. So kind of in terms of figuring out how to use Canvas and BannerWeb and TechSync, that's something that your CA, RA, IA can definitely help you out with. I know in terms of BannerWeb, there were like a bunch of like tutorials that went out when you were registering for classes, for example. And with like the activities fair being on TechSync, there'll definitely be kind of resources made available to you so that you can figure out how to interact with those people in different clubs. And all else fails, you can definitely always contact your CA or RA and they're more than willing to help you. And all of that kind of acclimation to resources and things like that doesn't end when like classes start. Like Chase mentioned, the Insight team stays with you all of first semester. And like I still talk to my students from my sophomore year or like my junior year. So it's not like a resource that you lose. That's a person that you kind of get to know and have that relationship with. So when you have questions, you're always welcome to go talk to them.
Great. So go ahead, Chase.
Sorry, adding on to your conscious point, there are also programs always being run on campus by different organizations, whether it's through the Student Activities Office or Greek Life. There's always opportunities for you to participate in programs and grow as a person and learn new things.
We also had a couple of questions in the chat about books. Parents are looking for information about how do they know what books and what needs to be purchased for classes, and then also should they buy them before they arrive? Are they available remotely? Would anyone want to take a response to this one? Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can take a stab at this. So my personal opinion on whether or not you should purchase a book before coming to classes would probably be no. Yeah, I see Chase and Akancha are agreeing with me there, so that's good. Simply because the amount that you might use the book might change, and your professor will be sure to be very clear, at least all the professors I've had have been very clear on the usage and whether or not you even need to get the book, because sometimes they're like, we're going to be working out of this book, but you don't need to buy it because it's an expensive book. I just have like printouts of it or a PDF of it. Here, you're only using a couple of pages. And also, professors will tell you what books you need. I'm assuming, let's see, the way I usually get is like on Canvas. So on Canvas, usually professors are able to post their syllabus, and then you can look at the syllabus. And like I said, don't purchase it before class. Usually on the first day is like the syllabus day. You'll go over what you're going to learn in the class. And the professor says, hey, you should buy this book. Then I would probably say buy that book. You can buy them, I think like for rent on like Amazon, you can buy them through our bookstore. Our bookstore does price match. So if you happen to find something cheaper somewhere else, then you can show them that price at the bookstore. They'll match that price. They'll sell it to you then and there for that price. Another resource that I really love and used my freshman year especially was the library. So the library has every single book that any class would require, but you can reserve it out. So for example, I'm taking Calc 3, and I need a couple problems out of the Calc 3 book, but I don't have it and it's not online, and I don't happen to have a friend who has it. So I go on down the library and I tell them, hey, I need this book here. And they say, okay, here's the book. You have it for 3 hours. It can't leave the library, but then you just have to give it back to us. So it's an awesome resource to not spend a lot of money on a book and just use it for the time that you need and then give it on back. You can even take it for like a couple seconds, take a picture of the problem that you might need and give it back. So WPI is making sure that in our quick 7-week terms, you're maybe not wasting a lot of money on a book that you might only use a couple times.
Perfect. I know that we are I'm keeping an eye on the time. I know we're close to the hour. Would anyone just quickly like to provide maybe a piece of advice for our parents as they get ready to support their students transitioning to WPI?
I could jump back in, I guess.
Go for it.
My personal advice would just be to be open-minded when you come to campus. Know that everyone else is in the same exact boat, and be willing to like reach out and make friends. And as far as like for the parents that happen to be on this call, definitely be supportive of your children if necessary. Maybe check in with them if they're not checking in as often. And honestly, like maybe know when to give them their own space, their own independence. You know, college is that time for students to be independent, maybe find their own way. So find that nice balance between maybe reaching out too much, reaching out not enough. And your student has plenty of resources on campus through their I-team, through the SDCC, and other outlets on campus. And I assure you they will be just fine.
I think I'd definitely also say that, like, especially just from like this panel, I know like we threw a lot of information at you and it can be overwhelming. Like it definitely is like a lot of kind of adjustment and a lot of new things that you're trying to figure out at the same time. But like you all have the resources that you need. Like any question you'd ever have definitely can be found on like the WPI website or just asking a peer or anything like that. So there definitely kind of is that support system in place that even if you feel like a lot is happening and you don't know how to keep up with it, like it's definitely doable. We've all done it and it was fine. So yeah, it's definitely going to be okay.
I guess I'd pick up on that theme as well. And it always just, it can be fast-paced. It can be challenging, but so much growth comes in that during that when we're challenged in life. And certainly it is a challenging time in life for all of us right now. And I would just say lean into it as best you can. I hope your sons and your daughters do lean into this environment to find their people. They're here somewhere. It may take longer for some than others, but their people are here somewhere to connect for sure. And ask for help is the other big theme that comes up from peers, from peer mentors, from the administrative supports that we have in place. And for parents, encourage that help seeking here. Don't be too quick to intervene on their behalf before you've had the chance to say, hey, have you looked into these resources for help? Have you tried calling this particular resource? Help them along with that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Charlie, Noah, Chase, Akancha, and also thanks to Andy on the back end, making sure this is set up and ready to go on YouTube. Much appreciated. I know that there were a lot of questions, great questions in the chat that we didn't get the opportunity to address. And so if folks would, if your question wasn't addressed and you would like a response, and make sure that you put your email into the chat, and I will make sure that you get a response in a timely fashion. So if anyone does have any questions or concerns, please feel free to email WPI NSO at wpi.edu. We also have a number of programs taking place this week, and so we look forward to hopefully seeing you at those as well. So thank you all to our presenters, and thanks to all the parents for joining us today. Much appreciated. Hope you have a good one.
Thank you all.
Thank you.